"Daddy, they hurt me." The words didn't echo across the ballroom. They didn't need to. They shattered it. Crystal chandeliers shimmered above silk gowns and polished tuxedos. Laughter bounced between marble pillars. Champagne glasses clinked in celebration of another record-breaking year for the empire built by Alexander Grant, the youngest CEO in the city's history. It was supposed to be a night of power, prestige, and pride. But in one corner of the golden-lit hall, a little girl in a white dress clung to her father's suit jacket, her tiny hands trembling. "Before we go further, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and standing up for those who cannot stand up for themselves, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel." Stories like this remind us who we are meant to be. Alexander Grant was a man feared in boardrooms. Investors whispered his name with respect. Competitors studied his every move. At 38, he commanded thousands of employees and controlled billion-dollar decisions with a steady hand and a sharper mind. But none of that prepared him for the tears in his 5-year-old daughter's eyes. Sophia had insisted on attending the annual corporate gala. She had twirled in front of the mirror that evening, her soft brown curls pinned delicately back, her white satin dress glowing like moonlight. "I want to see where you work, Daddy," she had said with innocent pride. Alexander had hesitated. The world he operated in was ruthless. But she had smiled at him with such trust that he couldn't say no. At first, the night had felt magical. Executives greeted her politely. Cameras flashed as she shyly hid behind her father's leg. For a moment, Alexander saw his life through her eyes, not as a battlefield of profit margins and negotiations, but as a palace of shining lights and important people. Then came the laughter. It started near the dessert table, where Sophia had wandered toward a group of older boys, the teenage sons of board members. They were dressed in tailored suits, already wearing the arrogance of privilege like a badge of honor. She had reached for a small chocolate pastry, her tiny fingers barely brushing the silver tray. One of the boys moved it away. Another mimicked her soft voice. A third leaned down and told her that she didn't belong there, that this was a party for important people, not babies. When she tried to explain that her daddy owned the company, they laughed harder. Someone nudged her shoulder. It wasn't a violent shove. It didn't leave a bruise. But humiliation has its own weight, and for a child, it is crushing. By the time Alexander found her, she was holding back tears with the fragile courage only children possess, trying so hard not to cry in front of strangers. "Daddy, they hurt me." The music continued. The crowd remained unaware. But something inside Alexander shifted. He followed her trembling finger to the group of boys still snickering by the table. Their fathers stood nearby, unaware or perhaps unconcerned, engaged in animated conversation about stocks and acquisitions. For a brief second, the old Alexander surfaced, the man who could dismantle careers with a single decision, who could make a phone call and have contracts dissolved by morning. Anger surged through him like wildfire. He imagined confronting the parents publicly, shaming them the way their sons had shamed his daughter. The entire ballroom would have fallen silent if he had raised his voice. Instead, he knelt. Right there on the polished marble floor, in his custom-tailored tuxedo worth more than some monthly salaries, the CEO of a billion-dollar corporation knelt before his daughter. He wiped her tears gently with his thumb. He listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't dismiss. He didn't tell her to be strong or ignore it. He let her feel. And then he stood up, not as a titan of industry, but as a father. Alexander took Sophia's hand and walked calmly toward the center of the ballroom. He signaled the orchestra to pause. Conversations faded into curious silence. All eyes turned toward him. He was known for commanding speeches about growth and innovation. Tonight, his voice carried something different, something raw. He spoke about success. About power. About the legacy they were building together. He thanked the employees who worked tirelessly behind the scenes, the cleaners, assistants, interns, drivers, people often invisible at events like this. Then his tone changed. He spoke about respect. About how true greatness isn't measured by wealth or position, but by how we treat those who are smaller, quieter, or seemingly less important. He didn't mention names. He didn't point fingers. But the message was unmistakable. He shared that his daughter had just been made to feel small. Not by strangers off the street, but by members of the very community that claimed to stand for excellence. A heavy silence settled over the hall. The boys shifted uncomfortably. Their fathers looked down. Alexander's voice softened as he lifted Sophia into his arms. He told the room that she would grow up remembering this night, not for the chandeliers or the applause, but for how people made her feel. And he asked a simple question. What kind of legacy do we want our children to inherit? No threats followed. No punishments were announced. But the next morning, changes began. A new foundation was launched under the company's name, dedicated to mentorship programs that paired executives with underprivileged children. Corporate events were redesigned to include employees' families equally, from janitors to senior managers. Workshops on empathy and leadership became mandatory at every level. The board members whose sons had mocked Sophia requested private meetings. Apologies were made, sincere ones. The boys themselves were brought to volunteer at the foundation's first community event. Weeks later, Sophia stood beside her father again, this time at the opening of a children's learning center funded by the company. The same boys who had laughed at her were helping hand out books to younger kids. Their arrogance had softened into something closer to humility. Sophia didn't fully understand the ripple effect of that night. She only knew that when she held her father's hand now, she felt safe. Alexander understood something deeper. He realized that power used for revenge might win a moment, but power used for change builds a future. And that night in the ballroom, when his daughter whispered that she was hurt, he had been given a choice: protect his ego or protect her heart. He chose her heart. If this story touched you, if it reminded you of the responsibility we carry as parents, leaders, or simply as human beings, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. Comment below with the word kindness if you believe compassion is stronger than cruelty. Before we end, I have a special request. Comment legacy if you believe true success is measured by the lives we uplift. Because sometimes the most powerful CEOs aren't the ones who control companies. They're the ones who kneel on marble floors to wipe away tears. And sometimes, the quietest voice in the room, a little girl saying, "Daddy, they hurt me," can change an empire forever.